Liberty, equality and terrorism. Why France is struggling to hold on to its famous founding principles. And the politics of a piece of cloth. Young women debate Europe's problem with the hijab. I'm Martin Stanford. This is Inside. Welcome to Inside. The beaches of the south of France weren't just home to holidaymakers this summer. They also featured heavily armed anti-terror patrols and were the centre of a worldwide controversy when officers asked a Muslim woman to remove her clothes because they didn't respect secularism. Taken together, the two images could be said to sum up a country struggling to reconcile the modern challenges of security, migration and integration, weighed up against its traditional values of openness and togetherness. Revolutionary France produced a country founded on the principles of liberty, equality and fraternity. And for more than 200 years, those words have been a source of pride and national unity. Now, France is a nation struggling with divisions, inequalities and issues of integration. The country's colonial past and egalitarian ideals have seen decades of migration from North Africa, with 16% of its immigrant population being of Algerian origin. But a combination of economic and social issues have left migrant and predominantly Muslim communities feeling left behind in isolated suburbs with a lack of opportunity. That feeling was expressed in Paris and across the country in 2005, with weeks of rioting ending in a state of emergency. Its deliberately secular nature has also divided opinion. In 2004, religious symbols were banned from schools. In 2011, full-face veils were banned in public, the government calling it an affront to the values of France. Now, those issues of perceived economic and cultural divisions have been made more acute, with the series of so-called homegrown terror attacks. Last year's assault on the satirical weekly newspaper Charlie Hebdo was carried out by two Parisian-born children of Algerian immigrants. A day later, a French citizen of Malayan parents attacked a kosher supermarket, taking hostages and killing 4 people. In November, Paris was home to the country's deadliest night of violence since World War II. 130 people died during a night of shootings, hostage-takings and bomb attacks. The perpetrators were part of a Belgian terrorist cell, but several were French citizens. And on July the 14th of this year, more than 80 people were killed in Nice as an attacker drove a truck through a crowd during Bastille Day celebrations. The Tunisian-born man responsible had been living in the city since 2005. The political atmosphere since those incidents has seen global protests over decisions by a number of towns to ban the burkini, calling it a symbol of the failure of integration. And support has grown for right-wing politicians. So while the country is unified in its public response to the terror attacks, its pledge to uphold liberty, equality and fraternity may depend on its politicians' ability to deliver the reality of all those words to all of their people. Well, to discuss that further, I'm joined in France by Rimsera Alouane, who's a researcher in public law and international human rights at the University of Toulouse. Rimsera, why do you think the difficulties of the Muslim population have been so poorly addressed?
First of all, the French politicians, the French lawmakers, our representatives, have never or didn't even try to consider their French fellow Muslims as full citizens, as people who are full part of the fabric of this country. And this led to a sort of disintegration. These people are completely out of society, marginalized, both by societies, but also by the world that surrounds them, their fellow men and women. And this is highly problematic because if it's not addressed as soon as possible, things will get worse.
But there have been generations of particularly Algerians, one think, who've come into France. There hasn't been a problem up until the last few years. What's changed, do you think?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that the situation between the first generation and the next generation of Muslims has a different story. First, the first generation came from Algeria to work in France, and they have been actually outcasted from society. They were here to work, and they had to remain discreet. They feared actually to express their identity by fear to be sent back to Algeria, for example, or to any other North African country. The second generation, though, and the third, are born here, are French, and the problem is that they are kind of stuck in the middle, between the culture of their parents and the culture they are born into. And the second generation is full French, and that's something that hasn't been addressed properly because of this marginalization, this institutionalized marginalization of these populations.
So this idea of France being a very liberal country, one that everyone is equal, there are no particular points of tension, is wrong, isn't it? There clearly have been points of tension, and they are bursting forth now. Well,
your question is actually very interesting because indeed, we are the country of liberty, equality, fraternity. Our constitution guarantees equality for everybody, regardless their backgrounds, their ethnicity, their religion. But in matter of application, this has been problematic. And actually, our French ombudsman, the défenseur des droits, the defender of the right, just 2 or 3 days ago, raised serious concerns about the treatment of minorities in France, and especially regarding employment and hiring discriminations, for example. Also, a recent study showed that because of institutional discrimination, because of discrimination in the workplace as well, France is also losing 150 billion euros because of that. So yes, we technically and legally have equality that must be applied, but reality is another thing.
And yet France has one of the most diverse political scenes as well, doesn't it? From the centre-left, but also an extreme right. Is that part of the picture? And the extreme right are proving steadily more and more popular as each election goes by.
Oh, of course, of course. The far right is part of the narrative. And what is actually even more worrying is that the left wing and the right wing are also playing the game of the far right wing and populism. And the last affair with the burkini case shows it extremely well. Repeating the same populist narratives, the fear of others. Look, they are invading our country. They are going to impose Sharia law or whatsoever in France. But who are they? They are French Muslims who are just, trying to be full citizen, trying to contribute to the country, and also just trying to enjoy the right that our constitution provides.
What's the feeling, though, amongst the centre ground, about the average, the apolitical, if you like? Are they concerned? Are they actually frightened by the prospect of terrorism when you have so many people murdered in the south of the country, or the incidents in Paris, or a clergyman, a priest being murdered?
Of course, the people are scared. Of course, the average French is scared because they do not have proper answers. They don't have reassurance. They're not reassured at all. So yes, they are scared. And of course, they're scared of what the media and politicians gave them. Like, look, Muslims are an issue in France. We are trying to control the situation by making them disappear from the public space. But they do not address the issue, which create even more fear, which create even more terror from the people who just are scared for the future of this country. And of course, which create more populism and, probable votes for the far right wing in the coming elections.
The problem, I suppose, and the contrast between the have and have-nots, the very poor and the very rich, are exacerbated in the cities. Is that where you think the tension is, in Paris and the other great cities of France, that the difference between the people with very little money and those who are doing okay are the most dramatic, and therefore where the tensions will be highest?
You mean regarding Muslims?
In particular, yes.
In particular. The economy has its role. And I truly believe that if you want to fight anti-Muslim hatred, if you want to fight terrorism, if you want to fight radicalization, you have to go through economy. You know, people are lacking jobs. They are discriminated. They are put aside from society. They are not giving a chance. I just mentioned you the recent results and the concern raised by our ombudsman. The economy is something that has to be focused on. Unemployment. I mean, a lot of potential radicals do not have a job, are actually part of certain groups, you know, of people which have been brainwashed, are putting aside of society. And if we do not find a solution for unemployment, especially in certain zones, especially the ghettos, which have been left, the state has gave up on their children here. The solution won't be found. You can control mosques if you want. You can control Islam in France. Nothing will happen if you don't focus on economy. You know, you need to boost the economy, the local economy, to work with local partners, to help startups as well. And the rest will come naturally.
Rim Sarah Alawain, thank you very much indeed. This is Insight. Coming up after the break, we discuss the hijab and why it garners so much attention.